Hey everybody, it's your boy Carson Fox with another episode of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. It's the pregame show between our West Virginia Mountaineers, who are 6-3, 4-2 in conference play, at the vaunted Oklahoma Sooners, who are 7-2, 4-2 in Big 12 play. A 7 p.m. kickoff from Memorial Stadium in Norman, Oklahoma. And if you're watching on TV on Fox Network, if you're tuned into what happens in Vegas, the people out west say that this one's going to be a tough one for the Mountaineers. 12.5 to 13-point underdog going on the road at Norman. And as you know, as how I like to start all these shows, I like to talk about the history. We'll pause just for a second to take a look at what's at this point in the season, with 3 games left in the regular schedule before the postseason play, what's on the line for both teams, because this actually is a matchup unlike some of the other matchups that are already happening across college football, notably like Syracuse and Pittsburgh, for example, that really don't mean a darn thing. So at least for this game, this means something. I would say for both teams, both our teams are really needing a win to stay in contention for a spot in the Big 12 championship game. And you might be saying to yourself, Carson, how in the heck are the Mountaineers still in contention potentially to make the Big 12 championship game? But they're not really mathematically eliminated just yet. Now some chips have to fall the Mountaineers' way. For example, Oklahoma's 2 losses in back-to-back weeks of Kansas and Oklahoma State's really hurt their chances more so than West Virginia. So this is a golden opportunity really for Neal Brown and the Mountaineers. It would give Neal Brown just his 2nd ranked win as head coach at West Virginia. And, of course, notably, West Virginia's 7th on the season, that much closer to what I've been saying all year and going back to late last spring of getting to the goal of 8 wins for this year. So I think this could also go very far in legitimizing the claim of Neal Brown being retained for 2024. Getting this ranked win, especially if West Virginia could follow it up with just closing the season out with 3 consecutive wins, starting it off with this Oklahoma win, to get to 9 wins pre-bowl game, I don't know how you couldn't at that point in time. So still a lot on the table. Too early to tell. I know I just gave you the most optimal positive thing is if West Virginia can go undefeated through these next 3 games. But I mean, at the opposite end of the spectrum is if you go winless and get fall to 6-6, and oh boy, we're back to Neal Brown's on the hot seat, I believe, and it could get ugly in Mountaineer Nation. So. The other thing, I know I said this at the end of the recap show last week, is I thought that Neal Brown had finally got back to over 500 as head coach at West Virginia, but right now he's still at 28-28. So this win against Oklahoma could be big. It could really, prove the climb per se that's been building since 2019 is actually climbing. I think with this win against Oklahoma. And the other thing, and this is just for me personally and for probably a lot of the fan base, is I don't like Oklahoma. So I would love to see the Sooners and their arrogant fans get sent packing out of this Big 12 conference and onward to the SEC. And good riddance to them, because this has been the Sooners conference for very well, like over a decade. So if they want to go and get their heads beat in by Alabama and LSU and Georgia and Tennessee, and even if Florida can bounce back, they know they can, good riddance to them. Because Oklahoma could just sit pretty in this conference, continue to win it year in and year out with Texas out of the league, or at least be right there. And then you're into the college football playoff. What more could you ask for as a conference champion than you get one of those top 5 seeds and you're sitting pretty against some of the at-large bids? So I digress, but it's just whatever. Get them out of here. Done with it. You made your bed, so you got to lay in it. If I'm looking down like my hatred list of schools that I hate, Pitt number 1, Virginia Tech number 2, probably Penn State number 3, Maryland's climbed its way up to number 4 on my list. Louisville, and I already sparked the flames with some of their fans on Twitter this week, calling them overrated at number 11 in the country. Syracuse, and then it's like right there with Oklahoma and Texas. West Virginia obviously having better success against the Longhorns than the Sooners as time opponents in the Big 12 Conference. Right there, the two of them, both Oklahoma, they worked their way in, for me, into the top 10 most hated. I mean, I kind of consider like Notre Dame kind of in there, but I'm kind of young to have that hatred from the late 80s of playing in the national championship game. I don't like Ohio State. I mean, the list is long. But let's just say it would please me nothing more after now winning the Backyard Brawl. I wanted that Houston game, obviously, and beating Dana Holgorsen. I think most West Virginia fans did, to now win this Oklahoma game for these myriad of reasons why, both for the team and for the fan base. So, as I like to do, we'll talk about the history. We'll talk about who are these Oklahoma Sooners and what you can expect when West Virginia has the ball, when Oklahoma has the ball. Take a look at the special teams because I always think that's an underrated thing to talk about, and give you a prediction here at the final with some analysis in between. So the matchup history, unfortunately, has been all Sooners. 3-11, dating back to 1958 when West Virginia started off playing in Norman, lost 47-14 in 1958. A 20-year hiatus, 1978. Who's that? Frank Signetti's team went down to the Sooner State and got crushed, 52-10. Maybe one in the annals of West Virginia football history, arguably its greatest win, and for some of our older West Virginia fans, maybe you can speak to this, and I'd love to hear your comments here on West Virginia. A huge win, understated, in Don Nehlen's legacy, was beating the Sooners 41-27 on the road in 1982 against a Barry Switzer-led team that was has been for many decades been a blue blood and a power in college football for little old West Virginia, who I think at that time was independent or still part of the SoCon. I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately. Going down, beating the Sooners on the road, that was huge for a jumping off point for Don Nehlen in his career early in his tenure, third season. So then, of course, how can we forget 2008, the Oklahoma-West Virginia Fiesta Bowl matchup. 2008, but it was really the 2007 season where Pat White, Noel Devine, Owen Schmidt, and that vaunted WVU defense came after Sam Bradford all night long and beat the Sooners by 20 points to win their second of 3 BCS Bowls in a span of 8 years. Then, when West Virginia joined the Big 12 Conference, it was a game I'll never forget, namely because of Tavon Austin's 578-yard all-purpose game in Morgantown, in which West Virginia lost because of a missed extra point. Can you believe it? 50-49. There's no way that Tavon Austin, based on that performance, should have, came away with a loss given his efforts in that contest. But West Virginia did. And then it was just continuous losing throughout the Dana Holgorsen era. Had some close calls coming up, most notably in 2018. 2013, it was just a 16-7 game, very defensive, fierce defensive contest. But then really, Bob Stoops into Lincoln Riley just really rolled with Samaje Perine in 2014. Then you get into the Baker Mayfield era with that offensive line and Mark Andrews at tight end. And then, into Kyler Murray. And, we can talk about 2018, sadly, till the cows come home, and how West Virginia got screwed over by the refs at the very end in that game. And then 2019 with Jalen Hurts against a West Virginia team in complete rebuild, got trounced. 2020, the game got canceled. 2021, here was the game. Last time West Virginia played in Norman, almost pulled off an upset. I really go back to a third quarter play by Parker Moore, false starts on the Oklahoma 1 as Letty Brown's barreling into the end zone. So West Virginia, I think at that point in time, was going to go up 10. They were up 3. It was either tied or West Virginia was up 3 at that point. And then because the ball was pulled back, Garrett Green was in it at quarterback, got all the way back to the 1. Jared Deggy, who'd been off the field for the previous 5 plays, comes in, misses a Bryce Ford Wheaton, airmails it out of the end zone. West Virginia has to settle for 3. Back and forth. We obviously know the unfortunate snap between Zach Frazier and Jared Deggy, which I think is still lesser of an extent than the egregious error by Moore on the false start in the third quarter. But Oklahoma kicks the walk-off field goal to come out victorious for Spencer Rattler, who really got pulled after that point in the game, replaced by Caleb Williams, and now we know the legacy of both those quarterbacks with 2 different teams. So then we talk about 2022, and first and foremost, what I remember most about that game is just the absolute gross rainstorm that came through Morgantown that day. And finally, West Virginia slew the Giant in Oklahoma, beating the Sooners 23-20. And that rainstorm, just like this Texas Tech game in September, played a part in that. Neil Brown finally turned to Garrett Green at quarterback in the second quarter after, I remember the postgame comments declaring Green's skill set fit what they wanted to do in the game better. Didn't have anything necessarily to do, I guess, with JT Daniels throwing like a terrible interception straight into the hands of Danny Stutston and just moving the offense nowhere. But Green finally took over fully in the second half when the game was 12-6. Some crazy missed extra points happened in that first half. And he finished the game with 138 yards passing, 119 yards rushing, and 3 total touchdowns, saving the day for the Mountaineers, who after Oklahoma kicker Michael Turk missed a go-ahead field goal, a 46-yard field goal with 6 minutes and 24 seconds left in the fourth quarter. It was Green and the WVU offense did exactly what Oklahoma did against West Virginia the year prior in Norman, went on a 16-play drive using all 3 of Oklahoma's timeouts, using all the remaining portion of the clock, and Casey Legg booted through a 25-yard field goal as time expired. West Virginia walked out victorious. So it's been hard. It's been really hard. It was, Oklahoma is definitely the thorn in the side of the legacy of Dana Holgorsen as head coach at West Virginia, among other things. But now, look at what Neil Brown's done in really the last calendar year. Coming up with victories. I know he lost to Oklahoma State already this season, but beat the 2 Oklahoma teams last year at the end of the season, beat Texas Tech early this season, finally getting that monkey off his back, and now what can he do? Can he go into Norman with this squad, and can the Mountaineers pull off a double-digit upset? So let's talk about these Sooners, and I really do think that after they spent gazillions of dollars in the transfer portal this offseason. That's an underrated thing that happens in the dark web of college football that fans just really aren't all that knowledgeable for. But just know that Texas and Oklahoma spent a king's ransom this offseason on transfer portal players. And you can look at the roster and you can see it by how many transfers they have on this team from over the last 2 years. So with that, all that money being spent to prepare them on their roster for time in the SEC next year, I think they've received the benefit of the doubt, being a blue blood also, to start out the season after they finished a 6-7 season last year, and Brent Venables was already on the hot seat after year 1. They came out hot, beating Arkansas State, SMU, whipping Tulsa, opening Big 12 win on the road against Cincinnati, blowing out Iowa State by 30, and then most notably winning the Red River Shootout 34-30. And the Sooners were just absolutely rolling at that point in time. Then, as we talked about before, we talked about the UCF matchup a couple of weeks ago for West Virginia. They ran into a hot hand in that UCF high-powered, high-flying offense maybe took the Golden Knights a little too lightly at home. UCF, if it wasn't for their offensive line just getting John Rice Plumlee killed in that contest, and maybe he felt a little bit better after his leg injury, the Sooners would have been riding a 3-game losing streak, because it all came down to a 2-point conversion play that UCF failed. Oklahoma came out victorious 31-29. And then these last 2 weeks, 2 heartbreakers. On the road at Kansas, 38-30. And then last week, the final edition of Bedlam, 27-24. And I got to say, just to talk about that game, I got a couple of controversial calls really played into the way in the fourth quarter in Oklahoma State's favor when that pass interference called on Makari Vickers against Rashad Owens. And then after that, on that play, Brent Venables comes out on the field and gets called for a personal foul. Unsportsmanlike conduct costs Oklahoma 30 yards of field position en route to a touchdown, and then a no-pass interference call on Oklahoma State's Dylan Smith versus Oklahoma's wide receiver Drake Stoops. So I'm never going to feel any sort of shame or pity the Sooners for getting hosed by the Big 12 referees. I'll acknowledge it. I think there was a bit of hosing going on in that game. And that's why, the Big 12 is not protecting Oklahoma, and they're not going to protect Texas. But, if Texas is West Virginia or the Big 12's best shot at making the college football playoff, you got to call it at least somewhat fairly. But the Big 12 referees were giving a very short leash to Brent Venables and staff, and they called it as such, so I'm not going to feel bad for him. And another thing, it didn't get called. I saw the video on Twitter of that Oklahoma staffer who's probably some grat GA trying to, act tough out there in his Oklahoma gear and standing on the sidelines and elbowing Alan Bowman as he ran out of bounds and trying to knock him. What is that? That is the seething arrogance that I sense from Oklahoma fans. Is that they have this, and it came out in Riley, it came out in its teams over the years, is they're take no prisoners, we're going to play to the letter of the law and continue to press the line and what's going to be called and what's not going to be called. And we get the benefit of the doubt because our conference, we're the golden children of this conference, so we're going to get the calls and we're going to get taken care of. So we might go in there and do some things dirty. I don't think they're as dirty as TCU. TCU's dirty no matter what. But I'm just saying Oklahoma's right there. And they just carry themselves in such a way that we're not going to take our foot off the gas pedal. I don't care if it's 70-0, or I don't remember how bad they beat Baylor when it was 66-0 or something. I don't know. I think it was 2018. But anyway, Oklahoma will ring up points. So we might as well start there, talking about when Oklahoma has the ball. And if you take a look at the numbers, another great offense this year, the nation's number 8 scoring offense at 40 points per game. We think, and the narrative has been since Brent Venables came onto the scene as the head coach last year, that this was going to become more of a defensive-dominated team. And don't get me wrong, their defense is much improved, and I'll get into that. But Oklahoma is still a traditionally just like West Virginia is, traditionally an offensive team. That is what they are known for. That's what they're bred for. They have all these 5-star and 4-star players from the state of Texas and the Great Plains, and they were recruiting nationally, especially at quarterback under Lincoln Riley. After Mayfield and then Murray and then Hurts almost won and won a Heisman Trophy. So, sorry, I had a little bit of computer issue. Didn't hope that the record wouldn't stop there. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Nation's number 8 scoring offense, nation's number 10 passing offense at 313 yards per game, and it all begins and ends with Dylan Gabriel, the senior quarterback, transfer from UCF, 12th in the nation with 2,646 passing yards, 20 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, with a 72% completion percentage. And when you can take a look back at my Twitter history back this summer, I thought coming into the season he was the best returning starting quarterback. I know Jalen Daniels was right there, don't get me wrong. But Dylan Gabriel, I just saw it even in that game against West Virginia last season. He's just perfect for what Oklahoma wants to do. He's a little small, don't get me wrong, but Oklahoma has gotten away with having small quarterbacks in Mayfield and Murray. So, like, he's exactly the kind of player that cut from the same cloth. Not a huge arm, but, I mean, he can throw it all. He's very similar, I feel like, to John Rice Plumlee, but just a little bit better. A little bit better of an athlete. He hasn't, suffered that kind of injury that Plumlee had earlier this season. So I like Gabriel. He's what makes this offense go. Now, Oklahoma is, like, nicked up at running back. Marcus Major and Tawee Walker. They have really three players with Gavin Sawchuk who they like to rotate into this backfield. Both of those guys who I mentioned at the forefront are questionable for this contest, so we'll see who it is. If it is Sawchuk, he did have a 64-yard home run hit last week against Oklahoma State, finished the day with 13 carries for 111 rush yards for a total. So, but I'm not as impressed with this Oklahoma run game as a whole for the season as I have been in traditional years, even going back to last year with Eric Gray in the backfield. So I think that West Virginia can play these guys straight up, very similarly in the way that they did UCF, that if they can limit the shots down the field to singles and doubles and not give up any sort of home run hits, rely on this much improving front seven. These last couple of weeks, it really seems like they've gotten back to the basics and gotten better in the tackling department. Ben Cutter really coming along at linebacker. Lee Koba still being a monster and getting better effort out of this defensive front, not getting run over like Oklahoma State did to them. I think that West Virginia can take mano-a-mano against this Oklahoma run game. They're still going to give up yards, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to be one of the best backfields that they faced better backfields in Texas Tech, obviously Oklahoma State, TCU's Taj Brooks and Amani Baker, I think, another good running back. So West Virginia can take them. I don't want to give away one of my three keys to the game, but it's one of the factors, though, I feel like, in stopping the run that is one of the three keys to the victory. So I'll tell you about that a little bit later. Talking about this wide receiving core for Oklahoma, I don't think it's C.D. Lamb good as a few years ago with Holiday Brown on the opposite side. But you got some playmakers who are obviously accumulating statistics. And, of course, they all run through slot possession, wide receiver, number 12, Drake Stoops. 52 catches, leads the team, 527 yards, and 6 touchdowns on the year. So he's your slot possession guy. They went to him in a critical moment last week against Oklahoma State. He was targeted a lot in that game last year in Morgantown. So I think someone in the slots, is it one of these awesome safeties? Is it Aubrey Burks, or is it one of the smaller guys like Anthony Wilson or Marcus Floyd who match up mano-a-mano with this guy who's going to be working predominantly out of the slot in that against West Virginia's 4-2-5 defense? Their number one guy, I feel like their best receiver, is Jaleel Farouk at 33 catches, 547 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's a bigger play threat, just a bigger obviously a bigger in stature than Drake Stoops. They went out in the transfer portal a year ago and got him, and now he's kind of taken over that Marvin Mims role, who's now playing in the NFL. So watching out for Farouk. Now the big home run hitter at 24.8 yards per catch, who you have to watch, he tore up UCF in that game a few weeks ago, was Nick Anderson. Just 20 catches on the season, but like I said, 497 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's their big play guy. And a guy who they haven't had for the last couple of weeks due to injury is number 5, Andrel. I hope I'm saying his name right. Andrel Anthony, 27 catches, 429 yards, and 1 touchdown. So this team is loaded at wide receiver, just like Houston was a few weeks ago. TCU had some good, some big play receivers. So where I think UCF just had 2, I think I might take Javon Hardy. Why did I say Hardy? Is it Baker? Javon Baker, as well with his brother, Kobe. No, not No, there's another Baker. He was the third string. Richardson, I think, was the second string. UCF might have better receivers. It's close. It's close. I would at least take, probably Baker as my number one, just at that big body, big play ability, former Alabama transfer. So I really like him a lot. But Oklahoma's got great receivers. I can't knock them there. So if you have a great receiving core, you got a great quarterback in Gabriel. You got and then look at their tight end too. It's a familiar name in Austin Stogner, just 10 catches for 91 yards. But he's been around the program for a long time and made enough plays. What I will say, I saw this from a Twitter account called CFB Film Room. Drop this statistic, and I wanted to share it for this program. West Virginia leads the Power 5 at percentage of pass attempts in which a defensive back makes a play on the ball. So, interesting note there that West Virginia leads the Power 5 at 20%. Second was Notre Dame at 19.7%. Third was Rutgers at 17.8%. And fourth was Kansas at 17.1%. So all, four good teams having a good season so far with positive records for the year. Two of them being ranked. So, and it makes sense with how many passes defensed Beanie Bishop has, leading the nation, and having 4 or 5 interceptions already on the season. So West Virginia's secondary, I still think is a work in progress. I guess not like what I mean by that is I don't think like this secondary could compete against, say, a Washington to a very high degree, to an LSU. They're not like that top level kind of defense. But for the Big 12, especially this year, I think they can play with anybody in this league. Texas would probably give them a hell of a shot with Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell. And this Oklahoma team's going to take their best shot because they got 4 deep that can. It's going to be. They're going to try and take care of matchup problems or like issues for West Virginia. But if Anthony can't play, that helps out West Virginia's cause of only having to go against 3. But Aubrey Burks had a PFF grade of almost near 100, in the 90s. Earlier this week, making the first all-team, all-defense across the country for his performance last week against BYU. He was awesome. You can't say anything more about Beanie Bishop and how incredible and how much he means to this defense. So I think this team's ready. They're ready to go. I think, obviously, I give the edge to the Oklahoma offense, but I think West Virginia's defense is up for the task. And I see this playing out in the same way West Virginia did against UCF. It's all going to come down to this secondary and how they perform. And what I mean, like, the coverage will dictate the pass rush. And you might be asking yourself, Carson, what the heck do you mean by that? But Brown talked about it exactly, even after this weekly press conference after the UCF game, is that for the Create More Pressure Club, and sometimes I'm a part of this club, as I like to see West Virginia get in on the backfield, is these RPO teams get rid of the ball so quickly. It's a fake and it's a throw. So if you don't get there immediately on one move or a complete bull rush by this defensive line, then they're getting the ball out and they're going to do it. So the way to stop that is play awesome, either press coverage. I know West Virginia is predominantly zone, don't get me wrong, but if West Virginia can stifle the coverage reads by Dylan Gabriel, have to just honestly make him think for either a half a second or a second more. Look off his first read to his second read to his third read or the check down. The longer that it takes for him to go throughout his progressions and in the way that he executes a play, that gives ample time for this defensive front for West Virginia to get pressure, get in the backfield, and create havoc against him. And that is small. Like West Virginia had its shots against Gabriel last year. So they played well against him. I know it's at home, different atmosphere, different season, different team, but that's what it's going to come down to is, can these corners and safeties lock down their wide receivers for just, tick, 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 tick. If you can get the 3 seconds, you're going to have a better chance as this defensive line to then create pressure, get after the quarterback. Otherwise, if he's just going to beat nickel and dime you down the field or take some deep shots down the field as well, and you can't cover them, they're just going to pick you apart Gabriel's going to pick you apart, and it doesn't matter how many people you send at that point in time because they're just not going to get to him fast enough to make any play on the ball. So I put a lot of pressure, unfortunately, on this West Virginia secondary in this contest, but they're going to definitely be needed and called upon. So now let's talk about when West Virginia has the ball. And against Oklahoma's defense that's tied for 27th in the country in scoring defense at 20 points per game on average. They're second in the country in interceptions with 15 on the season, and they're number 6 in the country with tackles for loss at 71. Now, there is a red flag for this Oklahoma defense, and it's shown how much of a presence that he's made during this 2-game losing streak, and even going back after that Texas game. I know he got hurt in the Kansas game, but they're really missing linebacker Danny Stutzman. He's really the heart and soul, I feel like, who changes the complete complexion of this Oklahoma defense. He's number 28. Got injured in the second half of the Kansas game. He was a game-time decision this past Saturday against Oklahoma State. Couldn't go. And same thing is Brent Venables is playing his cards really close to the vest with Danny Stutzman. Hasn't said, just saying questionable. Probably going to be another game-time decision, or if he goes out there, he's not going to be 100%. But 73 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss on the season, 2 sacks, an interception, 2 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and fumble recovery. Now, sophomore linebacker Kip Lewis really stepped up last week at linebacker in Stutzman's absence, coming away with a team high, and this was by a large margin, 15 tackles. It was an awesome performance by the sophomore. But Stutzman just makes them that much better. And then the other player who it sounds like is more probable than Stutzman is to play is another part of their defense at cornerback, Gentry Williams. Has 3 interceptions on the season and makes them a more formidable team in the secondary. But again, at 15 picks, they got a lot of playmakers on defense, and then they get after you. Like they did against UCF a few weeks ago when I think they had 13 tackles for loss in that contest. So this is a good Oklahoma defense, but I really do think West Virginia is up to the task because they're playing their best football at the absolute best time. Over these last 4 games, they've averaged, even though I know they've gone 2-2 in those 4 games, averaged 40 points per game. That's awesome. They're now the nation's number 7 rushing offense at 218 yards per game. So I told you all during my preseason predictions that this West Virginia team could get to over 200 yards per game on average, and it's coming to fruition. And they're coming off a 7 seasons best 336 rushing yards against BYU with a lot of confidence. And that was despite missing right tackle Doug Nestor in that contest, who's also probably, just like Stutzman, going to be a game-time decision come this week. So I've been recording this while the Neil Brown show's been going on, so I don't know if he does give injury updates to Tony Caridi during this show usually, but I haven't been listening or haven't really been checking Twitter to see the news if Nestor is officially ruled out or won't travel, or it's one and the same really. But I would love to see Nestor come back for this game, even though Nick Malone played admirably. And again, how are you going to complain when your offensive line paves the way for these running backs to rush for 336 yards on the day? So he did great, and I think he can do fine once again, but it's like you want to go up in your toughest battles with your best soldiers. So that's just all I can say to that point is I want to see Nestor out there if possible. If not, trust in Malone. Hopefully he's going to do a great job out there. And the reason why I think West Virginia, despite Oklahoma having 71 tackles for loss on the season, look at these numbers over the last 4 games for opponents against Oklahoma in the rushing department. Now, they did a good job against Ollie Gordon last week, holding him to just 137 rushing yards on 33 carries, but also Gordon did score 2 touchdowns. So he's a Heisman candidate for a reason. 2 weeks ago against Kansas, gave up a boatload of yards, 225 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns on the ground to Devin Neal, Jason Bean, and Daniel Hinshaw. Going back to that UCF game with R.J. Harvey, Xavier Townsend, and Johnny Richardson, the 3 ran for 144 yards on 31 carries. And then against Texas, between Jonathan Brooks, C.J. Baxter, and Jordan Whittington, 31 carries, 163 yards, and a touchdown. So this OU defense is susceptible to the run. And the way that this offensive line is paving the way, Garrett Green's given them trouble now for, 2 years? Last year and the year before. So he adds that added dimension of a mobile quarterback with Jaheim White, with C.J. Donaldson, who both didn't face Oklahoma last year, so don't really have that experience, or like they don't have necessarily the scouting report other than what they've seen on film, that they don't know what they're going up against in thunder and lightning. And I hate to use that cliche as well, but I heard the raspy voice kids call them that on today's podcast, and I do think they can bring that sort of added dimension. Is Donaldson's going to pound you. He's Grond from Lord of the Rings. He's just going to pound you, and he's going to break the wall of Minas Tirith down, and he's going to get 5 yards per carry doing it against you. And then you hit you with the change of pace back in Jaheim White, and we saw the results last week against BYU. Now, obviously, Oklahoma's a better defense than BYU, but you get what I'm saying. So the other thing, and I'm going to just scream this out if it absolutely happens, and you heard it here first, is try a screen. Try a screen. Run the ball laterally with Rodney Gallagher and E.J. Horton, and the play calling, obviously, by Neil Brown in this contest is going to be huge to still predominantly run the ball between the tackles, but get that lateral game going in between. But use a screen. I'll just simply put that, because I don't want that to flow into my next point of talking about this, is I just want to see how, not the tunnel screen with the wide receivers crashing in and the line goes one way and the wide receiver comes the other way, a traditional running back screen. If Oklahoma's going to send pressure at you and try and come after Garrett Green, dink the ball over their heads, throw it to either Donaldson or Jaheim White and let them run for it. I promise you, let's see it. I don't know. We'll see if we see it, but I want to see it. The second point is I just think the accuracy of Garrett Green and not turning the ball over is going to be absolutely huge and pivotal, especially on the road in this contest. Now, completion percentage is not necessarily that I like to put a lot of emphasis on because of the context needed behind it. Like, if you look at John Rice Plumlee a few weeks ago at UCF. I mean, he was into the second or even early third quarter in which every single pass he threw was either a completion or an interception. So it doesn't necessarily tell the full story, I feel like, when someone has a 70 or more completion percentage and what kind of throws that they're throwing. But I'll just say at a 53% completion percentage for Garrett Green, he's 11th out of the eligible passers in the Big 12 who have played 7 or more games for their team. And if you've watched him, even during this 4-game hot stretch in which this offense has averaged 40 points per game, as I said, he's still missing on some throws that he should have. Now, the saving grace is he's tied with Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback he's playing in this contest, for the most completions of 20 yards or more in the conference at 19. So you really just got to ride or die with what Green's going to give you. Hope he's successful in the big must-have need moments of the game. And when he's unsuccessful and misses quarterbacks, it's really at an inconsequential moment. So I think Mike Kazaza and Chris Anderson of 2-4 Sports spotlighted this in their Campus Confidential podcast today, in which the completion numbers and the issues that Green is having comes in the mid-range passing game, where just, I think, a little more touch, a little more accuracy needs to be put onto balls rather than just the fastball that we all know he has. So if he can just be a little more accurate in this contest, and not throw, and if he's going to throw the deep ball, accurate enough for West Virginia's wide receivers to make a play, just every turnover, Oklahoma just makes you pay. They always have. I mean, going back to that 2018 game where Will Greer's, unfortunately, the fumbles that he had in that game really cost West Virginia that victory and a chance to play for the Big 12 championship. Is turning the ball against anybody, but most notably Oklahoma, is they're going to make you pay because they play at such a tempo offensively that they're going to want to ring up 70, 80, 90 plays. So giving them any extra possessions, especially with short fields, they're going to make you pay. So can't turn the ball over. And, like, the other thing is West Virginia's offensive line, for as much criticism it seems that the offensive line was getting, especially in the early portion of this season and going back previous years, look how far this offensive line has come, not only with the rushing department, but look in the pass blocking performance. They're tied for 11th in the country in sacks allowed at just 9. So playing 9 games for the season, they only allow, on an average, just 1 sack per game. I mean, that's fantastic. You don't want to give up any sacks, really, but that's great. It's not like this is just 2021 all over again, and West Virginia can't block, a kids at a pillow fight. So I just think run the ball consistently, stick with what you do best, and Green, whenever he does either take his shots down the field or try that screenplay, I'm telling you, just try it. Let's see what he does out there. So I'll take another 23-20 victory like he had last year. So that's what you can expect when both of those teams have the ball. Let's talk about special teams now. So West Virginia obviously has the edge in kicker. Michael Hayes is one of the best in the country, even though he was left off the 20 semifinalist lists for the Groza Award today, unfortunately. And he laughed about it on Twitter, and I agree with him. He should be at least a semifinalist, I would say. 12 of 13 on the year, adding to his total last week, going 3 for 3 on field goals with a long of 46 in that contest. Taking a look at the opposite way for Oklahoma, kicker Zach Schmidt, just 10 of 15 on the year. He's better, money inside 30. Most kickers are. 5 for 5. But then once you get past 30, he's 4 for 6. Between 30 and 39, just 1 for 3 between 40 and 49, and 0 for 1 from over 50 yards this season. So he's not now kickoffs is where he has the advantage. He has a much higher touchback percentage than Hayes does on kickoffs, but he has, because Oklahoma scored so much more on the season, more attempts. Hayes isn't any slouch when it comes to kicking the ball off deep, but just by the numbers so far of what we can see this year, Schmidt has the advantage. Now at punter, it's been a interesting journey for this Oklahoma team. They have 2 punters with lots of punts on the air, and Josh Plaster and Luke Elzinga. Now last week Elzinga did the punting, had 2 punts, had 1 for 56 yards and 1 for 55 yards. So, boy has a boot, that's to say, for sure. But Ollie Straw can really do just about anything you ask him for. 28 punts on the air with a 43-yard per punt average, 6 over 50 yards, 13 inside the opponent's 20. So, he's just excellent. So, I might go on a draw or an advantage to Ollie Straw in that department. The punt returners, so I'll just go returners in general. And Neil Brown was pissed about this. Watching his game preview video, I think it was yesterday, with Tony Caridi from the Push Car Center, he was still pissed. He was still, days later after the way West Virginia did against BYU this Saturday. He was so mad about how West Virginia did on kickoff, and punt coverage, and I know that BYU almost ran one back that was called back for holding on this, but he was just so heated. It's just a slight advantage Sooners in this one. Gavin Freeman doing the punt returning for Oklahoma with a 12.5 per punt return average. That's best for 13th in the country. Preston Fox, 18th in the country at 10.75 yards on average per return. And Fox hasn't had a lot of opportunities these last few weeks, it seems like, and that's why the numbers dipped ever so slightly. Or when he tried to make something happen, it just didn't work out. Gotta boot the ball if you're Michael Hayes, in touchback into the end zone, and then stop Gavin Freeman from making you pay in the punt return game. So let me give you my 3 keys to victory, and this is going to kind of span a little bit of everything. Might be a little obvious. Number 1, because I said that this game is going to play out just like it did against UCF, and I think the first team to 40 is probably the team that wins it, or 42, somewhere in that mark, is turnovers. Defensively, you got to slow down this Oklahoma onslaught, wanting to play fast, wanting to throw the ball down the field. limiting the home run hits to singles and doubles, not letting them beat you over the top per se. But so what changed the game for West Virginia in that UCF game? Because this UCF offense putting up a whole bunch of yards and they didn't capitalize with points because they turned the ball over. So you have to have the same working model. You have to do the same thing against Oklahoma and turn the ball over. Get it out of Dylan Gabriel's hands and into Beanie Bishop's. So we'll see what West Virginia can do in the turnover department to get after Gabriel and force some turnovers. Number 2, don't let Gabriel beat you with his legs on third down to continue drives. You look at the numbers from Plumlee, and there's so many parallels, I feel like, to that UCF game with this one. 9 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown in this game. I think if Gabriel does better than Plumlee did against West Virginia's defense, it's the opportunity for West Virginia to win, I think, just dramatically decreases, especially on third down. If he gets good enough protection in the backfield, he's looking, he doesn't find somebody, and then he takes off. He's not necessarily, he likes to pass from within the pocket. He is a pure passer, but he's athletic enough and he's dynamic enough that if he needs to run, if they call a few design runs for him, he's not going to not run, but he's going to want to run when he's forced to, and he usually makes good decisions on when he chooses to run. So this West got to keep outside contain, or the guys in the middle. I don't know if Ben Cutter or somebody else tries to spy him for all game long, but one-on-one tackling against Gabriel on third down, if he tries to take off, will be absolutely huge, I feel like. And then number 3, and I know I'm not really talking about anything with West Virginia's offense. I'm talking more so about their defense, because I think their offense can continue to, just like what I said, just keep going. Just keep doing your thing, keep pounding, do what you've done these last 4 weeks. I think you have some momentum. You figured something out. Neil Brown's done a much better job with Chad Scott calling plays. I think you're getting Hudson Clement back yet, but I don't even know if he cracks this lineup with the way that Traylon Ray and Rodney Gallagher have been playing recently. And you still got Devin Carter. Cole Taylor leads the team in receptions at tight end. So it's like you have an abundance of talent at the skill positions with an awesome line. I don't have any qualms about this West Virginia offense. I think they can do it. I'm worried about the defense. So the last thing, and what has killed West Virginia in its 2 games, besides considering the Penn State game, what killed West Virginia in those 2 games against Houston and then Oklahoma State? Something stupid. So don't do anything stupid. It's simple as that. If you don't take your helmet off after a touchdown that gives the other team good enough field position to throw one last Hail Mary to beat you after you've won the game, essentially, and then your idiot third-year cornerback kamikazes your punt returner, gives Oklahoma the ball inside the West Virginia red zone, and they score easily, changing the whole complexion of the game, there's 2 losses on those 2 plays. So don't do it against Oklahoma. Continue this good and I know last week against BYU, due to the penalty, like 10, what was that, the season high or really close to it in penalties, and apparently the rumor was that BYU was barking out West Virginia's cadence, so throwing off the offensive line, committing some false starts and just some irregular penalties that you usually don't see out of this offensive line. So I don't know if that's going to happen in this contest. Oklahoma doesn't do that. I don't think they do that, and I don't know why BYU wasn't called for that if that was the case. But penalties are a part of that, with doing some beating yourselves. That's unfortunately what happened in 2021 with beating yourselves with the Parker Moore false start, as I talked about at the beginning of this video. So don't do anything stupid. Continue to play disciplined, clean football out there. Run the ball down their throat, and hopefully West Virginia can come out with a victory. So on the season, in my predictions, I'm 5-4. So I've talked about this enough. I was right about Penn State. I was right about Duquesne. I was right about Pitt 3-0. Then I thought that West Virginia was going to tank before the bye with the Texas Tech and TCU games, come out of the bye and skyrocket on a four-game winning streak with Houston, Oklahoma State, UCF, and BYU. unfortunately, it hasn't worked out that way. So that's kind of why I'm just mediocre. So me predicting the way this schedule is played out, that's why I hate making preseason predictions, because it never works out the way you think it is. Like, West Virginia can go last year and beat Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, but lose to Pitt and Kansas. So what do you know with predictions? So going with my preseason prediction, I said this would be a loss. After winning those 4 games, they were going to come down to Oklahoma, going to play super tough. It's just like, it's hard not to, after just being fooled so many times. 2016, 2018, even that 2012 contest to a certain extent, like, look at it on paper, the entire schedule, and feel like, okay, we'll chalk up Oklahoma as a loss. Finally slaying the dragon, as I said last year, and getting a victory at home. Going on the road, double-digit underdog. I think West Virginia can cover this. I think that's, the spread is a little too high. I mean, West Virginia was a double-digit underdog to TCU and came out with a victory. So Vegas has just not figured out this West Virginia team. I think finally did last week against BYU when they covered. So they're going to cover again, the spread for sure. I just don't know if necessarily they can win. 34-30 is what I said at the beginning of the season. I guess I'll stick with it for this contest. Again, like I have been multiple times this season, I hope I'm wrong. I hope they prove me wrong. I hope they go out there. I hope they do all of the things that I'm laying out for you here so that West Virginia can get a victory. So I'm laying it out there for, this is how you do it. Here's the blueprint. Here's what it means. Here's why you should be motivated, etc., etc., etc. Now go do it. And I believe in them. I really do. I think that they can go out there and do this. This isn't a Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield-led Oklahoma team that you think can contend for a college football playoff and then, possibly win a championship. I don't think they're that kind of a cut this year. Not losing to Kansas, not losing now to Bedlam, not the way they've performed these last few weeks since winning the Red River Shootout. I think that was their Super Bowl, and I think they've just been trying to figuring out how to steer the ship that's gone a little bit wavy on the seas for this rest of this season. And if Stutzman's out, makes a world of difference, I feel like, for what West Virginia can do, and they can score points. So I don't even know if I necessarily believe in that prediction or that score. I think West Virginia might be able to score more. So I don't know. I'm just going to stick with what I wrote in August, and we'll see what happens when it comes to predictions. So and then last thing before I let you go, looking at the West Virginia is just getting there. With my preseason prediction on points per game average, stayed at 31 per game when I said I think they can get to 32. So we'll see if that changes after this week. And then defensively, they dropped. So awesome. I said by the end of the season they'd give up 27 points per game, and they probably did themselves a favor by holding BYU to just 7 points. So maybe that'll jump up a little bit after this game against Oklahoma, because I don't know if West Virginia can hold Oklahoma to under 28 points, but we'll see. So right now they're on the season at 24 points per game allowed. So that's great to see. Those are two most important statistics in scoring offense and scoring defense at the end of the day. So great to see, and this game means so much again, so much for the Mountaineers for not only this 2023 season but beyond. So I hope they beat the Sooners. If you've liked this video, or I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear what you think about my 3 keys to victory analysis, this, that, and the other thing. So go ahead, leave your comments here on YouTube, or catch me on Twitter at Carson_Fox27. If you like this video, check out the rest of my channel. And if you like some of the other videos that you see and hear from in here, I try to give you a preview video every Thursday, give you a recap video on Sunday. So I'll be back on Sunday. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. So I'll be back on Sunday. Subscribe to my channel, like this video so that more Mountaineer fans can see it across the YouTube interwebs and across social media. So I'll be tuning in. Can't wait for it. Another battle. Sooners, Mountaineers. Can't wait. My heart will be pumping. So, all right. I'll talk to you all on Sunday. Let's go. Hail West Virginia.